A world where silence costs money. The change did not come with an announcement. There were no sirens, no alerts on anyone's phone. One day, the world was the same as always. The next day, silence had a price. In this world, every second of silence costs money. Not much at first, just enough to notice. The rule was simple. When you speak, nothing happens. When you stay silent, you are charged. At first, people laughed. They treated it like a joke, a strange policy that would disappear in a few weeks. But it did not disappear. In the beginning, the effects were small. People started talking more at breakfast. They filled the gaps between sentences. They spoke while waiting for elevators. They spoke while standing in line. Meetings became longer, not because there was more to say, but because silence was no longer affordable. At home, television stayed on, even when no one was watching. Background noise became a necessity. Parents talked to their children more. Not always because they wanted to, but because quiet moments were expensive. Children learned early that thinking quietly came with a cost. Soon, silence stopped being something natural. It became a luxury. Cafes removed quiet corners. Libraries changed their rules. They allowed whispers. They allowed murmurs. Anything to avoid charges. People who enjoy being alone began to struggle. Not emotionally, financially. Introverts paid more than anyone else. They learned to hum. They talked to themselves. They left radios playing in empty rooms. Some carried small devices that generated noise just loud enough to avoid fees. As time passed, the rule reshaped the city. Public spaces grew louder, not chaotic, just constantly full. There was no silence to mark the end of a day. No quiet to separate thoughts. People stopped pausing before answering. They spoke quickly, sometimes without meaning. Words lost weight. Arguments increased. Not because people were angrier, but because stopping to think had become expensive. Then the economy adapted. Silence-free zones appeared. Rooms you could rent to sit quietly for a few minutes. They were small, clean, soundproof. Only some people could afford them. Inside, no one spoke. No one moved. Time felt slower. Outside, the city continued talking. Eventually, people stopped remembering what silence felt like. They remembered it as an idea, not an experience. There was a man who noticed this change early. He was not important. He had no special role. He worked a normal job and lived alone. Before the rule, he spent most evenings in silence. After the rule, his expenses doubled. At first, he tried to adapt. He spoke more at work. He left the radio on at night. But the noise followed him. It filled his apartment. It filled his thoughts. One evening, he turned everything off. The room went quiet. The charges started immediately. He sat still, watching the numbers rise. Not because he could afford it, but because he wanted to remember what silence felt like. He stayed there until the cost became unbearable. The next day, he went back to talking, like everyone else. Years passed. The rule remained. People adapted. They always do. Silence became rare. Not illegal, just expensive. Some said the world was more connected now. Others said it was simply louder. No one asked to remove the rule. By then, no one remembered why silence had ever been free.